My name is Allison Matthews, and at 28, I thought I had everything figured out. Career success, financial stability, and the wisdom to keep my dysfunctional family at arm's length. Then came the family reunion that changed everything. 24 hours after returning home, I checked my bank account and felt my world collapse. My entire savings, $47,000, gone. When I confronted my father, his response chilled me to the bone. He simply shrugged and said, "We needed it." Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear how I not only got my money back, but discovered my family's darkest secret. Growing up in Chicago's suburbs, I learned early that financial stability wasn't something I could take for granted. My father, James Matthews, was charming and loving, but perpetually irresponsible with money. He cycled through jobs, always chasing the next big opportunity that inevitably fell through. Mom was the stable one, working as a nurse and somehow keeping us afloat despite Dad's unpredictable income. Our modest 3-bedroom house in Evanston was often filled with tension over unpaid bills. I remember sitting at the top of the stairs at age 12, listening to my parents argue about refinancing the mortgage for the third time. That night, I promised myself I would never be financially dependent on anyone. By 14, I was babysitting for neighbors. At 16, I worked weekends at the local diner. Senior year of high school, I juggled school with 20 hours a week at a retail job. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account my mother helped me open, one my father couldn't access. "You're so much like me," Mom would say. Practical. Forward-thinking. She taught me to budget, to save, to plan for emergencies. "Money doesn't bring happiness," she told me, "but it buys you options." I worked my way through Northwestern University, combining scholarships with part-time jobs. Sometimes I'd go days on minimal sleep, cramming for exams after late shifts at the campus library or local restaurant. My friends partied while I worked. They took spring break trips to Cancun while I picked up extra shifts to pay for textbooks. Through it all, Mom was my cheerleader. Dad would occasionally ask to borrow from my carefully accumulated savings, but Mom always intervened. "Allison's money is for Allison's future," she'd say firmly, ending the discussion. When I graduated with my finance degree, I had two things most of my peers didn't: zero student debt and a job offer from a prestigious financial firm in downtown Chicago. My starting salary was more than my parents had ever made combined. I bought Mom a gold bracelet to celebrate, the first truly expensive gift I'd ever given anyone. 2 years into my career, disaster struck. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. She declined rapidly, gone within 5 months. I took leave from work to care for her in those final weeks, watching her vibrant spirit fade day by day. "Promise me you'll look after yourself first," she whispered one night, her hand frail in mine. "Your father will need help, but don't let him drain you financially or emotionally." I nodded, crying, not knowing how prophetic those words would be. After Mom died, Dad fell apart. I paid off their remaining mortgage and helped with expenses while Dad found himself. I expected grief, but what I didn't expect was how quickly he found Linda. Linda appeared in Dad's life just 6 months after Mom's funeral. She was everything Mom wasn't: flashy, materialistic, with a practiced charm that seemed to disappear when Dad wasn't looking. She had a teenage son, Max, who rarely made eye contact and spent most of his time gaming. Dad was smitten, telling me Linda brought him back to life. They married after dating for only 8 months. I wore navy blue to the small ceremony, unable to bring myself to wear black, but unwilling to pretend I was celebrating. Dad didn't seem to notice my reservation. He was too busy starting his new chapter. Throughout this time, my relationship with my half-siblings remained complicated. Tyler and Kaylee were from Dad's brief first marriage before he met Mom. They lived primarily with their mother but maintained contact with Dad. After Mom died, they started visiting more frequently, especially after Linda moved in. They seemed drawn to the newfound energy in Dad's home, so different from the grief-stricken atmosphere when it had been just him. I kept my distance, focusing on building my career. By 28, I was making a six-figure salary as a senior financial analyst. I lived modestly despite my income, remembering Mom's lessons about saving for the future. I had accumulated just over $47,000 in my personal savings account, money earmarked for eventually buying my own home. I limited visits with Dad and Linda to major holidays, finding excuses to miss casual get-togethers. The tension between Linda and me was palpable, though we maintained a veneer of politeness. Dad either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. When the invitation came for the extended family reunion at my uncle's lake house, my first instinct was to decline. It had been 2 years since I'd seen most of the family, and I wasn't eager to field questions about my lack of a relationship or when I planned to settle down. But something, perhaps guilt, perhaps a genuine longing to reconnect with family, made me RSVP yes. It would be just one weekend, I reasoned. I could handle anything for 2 days. I couldn't have known that those 2 days would change the course of my life and reveal the true nature of the people I had called family. The reunion was set at Uncle Robert's lake house in Michigan, a 5-hour drive from Chicago. I arrived Friday evening, my sensible sedan looking out of place among the lineup of SUVs, and my father's gleaming new pickup truck that I'd never seen before. "Allison, you made it." Uncle Robert greeted me with a bear hug. Aunt Patricia stood behind him, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We weren't sure you'd come, with how busy you always are." There was an edge to her comment that I chose to ignore. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied, grabbing my overnight bag from the trunk. The lake house was buzzing with activity. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, their spouses, their children, all creating a chaotic background noise that made me instantly regret coming. I spotted Dad on the deck, his arm around Linda, who was wearing a designer sundress I recognized from a recent collection. On her wrist gleamed a tennis bracelet that looked suspiciously like diamonds. "There's my girl," Dad exclaimed when he saw me, breaking away to give me a hug. He smelled of expensive cologne, another new development. "Linda, look who finally decided to join the land of the living." Linda air-kissed both my cheeks. "So glad you could tear yourself away from the office, Allison. We were placing bets on whether you'd actually show." I forced a smile. "Well, family comes first, right?" Dad beamed, missing my sarcasm entirely. "That's what I always say. Speaking of which, wait until you see what I got for the lake. Come on." He led me down to the dock where a gleaming motorboat was tethered. "Just picked her up last month," he said proudly, patting the boat's side. "Always wanted one of these beauties." I stared at the boat, my financial analyst brain automatically calculating its value. "It's impressive. What model is it?" 2023 Bayliner VR6, he said proudly. "Got a deal from a guy Linda knows." Even with a deal, I knew this boat cost at least $60,000. On what was supposedly my father's modest pension and Linda's part-time real estate income, this purchase made no sense. "That's quite an investment," I said carefully. Dad waved dismissively. "You only live once, right? After your mom died." I realized life's too short to not enjoy yourself. The casual mention of Mom to justify an extravagant purchase she would have never approved of felt like a slap. Before I could respond, Tyler and Kaylee appeared at the dock. "Allison," Kaylee exclaimed, giving me a hug. At 19, she looked different, designer clothes, professionally highlighted hair, and what appeared to be recent cosmetic work on her nose. I didn't think Miss Corporate America would actually show up. Tyler hung back, oddly uncomfortable. He'd recently turned 21 but looked older, with an expensive haircut and a Rolex watch I immediately noticed. "Hey," he said simply, avoiding direct eye contact. "Nice watch," I commented. He touched it self-consciously. "Graduation gift from Dad and Linda." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Tyler had graduated from community college last month. A Rolex seemed excessive for that achievement, especially given what I knew of Dad's finances. The evening progressed with an uncomfortable dinner where I noticed more signs of mysterious prosperity. Linda's designer clothes, Dad's new Omega watch, Kaylee talking about her upcoming trip to Europe, Max, Linda's son, with the latest gaming laptop and a sullen attitude. After dinner, I found myself cornered by Aunt Patricia in the kitchen while loading the dishwasher. "Your father seems to be doing well," she remarked, handing me a plate. Apparently, I replied neutrally. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Robert lent him money last year, you know. Quite a substantial amount. Said it was for medical bills." I frowned. "Medical bills?" "Dad's on Medicare plus his work supplemental insurance." Patricia's expression told me everything I needed to know. "Well, he paid it back suddenly last month. All at once." Robert was surprised. Before I could probe further, Uncle Robert appeared in the doorway. "Patricia, can I speak with you?" His tone was sharp, and Aunt Patricia quickly excused herself. Later that night, I overheard a heated argument between them on the porch. "You promised you wouldn't bring it up," Robert hissed. "She deserves to know," Patricia responded. "If James is, it's not our business. He paid us back. That's the end of it." They noticed me approaching and immediately fell silent, changing the subject to the weather forecast for tomorrow's barbecue. The next morning brought more oddities. Linda's casual mention of their winter plans to visit Aspen. Max's new drone that he flew recklessly over the lake. Kaylee's offhand comment about Dad helping her put a down payment on a condo. During the afternoon barbecue, I was showing cousin Stephanie photos from my recent work conference in Seattle when Max asked to see some of the pictures. I handed him my phone and went to get a drink. When I returned 5 minutes later, he quickly handed it back, and I thought I saw him close an app that wasn't my photo gallery. "Cool pictures," he muttered, walking away. That evening, Dad pulled me aside, his expression unusually serious. "I've been meaning to talk to you, Allison." "About?" "You work so hard. Always saving, never enjoying life." His eyes grew misty. "Your mother was the same way. Always worried about tomorrow instead of living for today." I stiffened at the mention of Mom. Mom was practical. She had to be. "I know you think I was the irresponsible one," he continued, "but life is about balance. All that money sitting in accounts, what's it for if not to live?" "Security," I said simply. "Independence." Dad looked at me strangely. "Family takes care of family, Allison. That's real security. Not numbers on a bank statement." Something about his words felt ominous. But before I could respond, Linda called him over to meet some late-arriving guests. The final strange moment came as I was packing to leave on Sunday. Linda cornered me in the upstairs hallway. "Your father worries about you," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes calculating. "All work, no life. No husband, no children, no real purpose beyond making money." I zipped my bag with more force than necessary. "I have plenty of purpose, Linda. And my personal life is none of your concern." She smiled thinly. "Family is always each other's concern. You'll understand someday when you're not so self-focused." The drive home was filled with unease. Something felt off about the entire weekend. The unexplained prosperity. The strange comments. The tension beneath the surface. Little did I know, my unease was about to become the understatement of my life. I arrived home Sunday evening exhausted from both the drive and the emotional toll of the weekend. After bringing my overnight bag inside, I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building, unwinding before heading up to my unit. Almost on autopilot, I pulled out my phone to check my bank account, a habit ingrained from years of financial vigilance. The moment I logged into my banking app, the world seemed to stop. I blinked, certain I was misreading the numbers. My savings account, which should have shown a balance of $47,236.18, displayed a balance of $236.18. My heart raced as I frantically checked my transaction history. There it was, a series of transfers made over the past 2 days to an account I didn't recognize. 5 separate transfers, carefully kept under $10,000 each, presumably to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. With trembling hands, I called the bank's emergency line. The representative confirmed my worst fears. The transfers had been initiated from my authenticated app and appeared legitimate from their end. "When were these transfers made?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Let's see. 2 yesterday between 2:15 and 4:30 p.m. and 3 today between 10 a.m. and noon," she replied. Yesterday afternoon, when Max had my phone. Today, when I was saying goodbyes and packing. My phone often left unattended in the guest room. This is fraud, I said firmly. I did not authorize these transfers. The representative explained they would open an investigation, but cautioned that the authentication had come from my device with my credentials. The process could take weeks, with no guarantee of recovery. As I ended the call, rage replaced shock. I knew exactly where my money had gone. I drove to my father's house like a woman possessed, barely registering the traffic around me. It was just after 8 p.m. when I pounded on his front door. Linda opened it, her false smile fading when she saw my expression. Allison? What's wrong? I pushed past her into the living room where Dad sat watching TV, looking relaxed and unconcerned. Max lounged nearby on his phone. Give it back, I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. Dad muted the television. Give what back? My money. The $47,000 transferred from my account. Give it back. A moment of silence fell across the room. Max suddenly found reason to leave, slipping out without a word. Linda crossed her arms defensively. Dad's expression shifted, not to shock or denial, but to a strange mix of defiance and justification. Sit down, Allison, he said calmly. Let's talk about this rationally. Rationally? You stole from me. There's nothing rational to discuss. We didn't steal, Linda interjected. Family helps family. You've been blessed with financial success while we've struggled. I turned to her incredulously. Struggled? In designer clothes? With new boats and watches and trips to Aspen. Dad stood up now, his expression hardening. That money was just sitting there. We needed it. You have plenty, your job, your investments. That doesn't make it yours to take. I shouted. I worked for every dollar in that account. Nights, weekends, holidays, while you were buying boats and Rolexes for Tyler. Dad's face flushed. I'm your father. After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done? I laughed bitterly. Mom was the one who sacrificed for me. You were the one she was always covering for. Making excuses for, cleaning up after. Linda stepped between us. Your father has gambling debts, Allison. Serious ones. People were threatening him. We had no choice. So you steal from your daughter instead of dealing with your problems like adults? I looked at my father with new eyes. What happened to you? It's just money, Dad said dismissively. You'll make more. Family comes first. This isn't family, I said, my voice breaking. Family doesn't steal from each other. The front door opened and Tyler and Kaylee walked in, freezing when they sensed the tension. Their expressions told me everything they knew. They'd known all along. Did you know about this? I asked them directly. Kaylee looked at the floor. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Neither denied it. You have 24 hours to return my money, I said, my voice deadly calm now. Every cent. Or I go to the police. Dad snorted. You wouldn't. You wouldn't put your own father in jail. Try me. Linda stepped forward, her true nature finally showing through her carefully constructed facade. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything your father's done for you, you'd sue your own family? Who raised you? Who put a roof over your head? Mom did, I replied coldly. And she'd be disgusted by all of you right now. Dad's face darkened. You don't know what your mother would think. She understood family loyalty. Loyalty? Is that what you call theft? It's not theft when it's family, Dad insisted. It's redistribution. You have more than you need. We had needs. Like boats? Like watches? Like cosmetic surgery for Kaylee. I shook my head in disgust. 24 hours. Then I go to the police and my lawyer. I turned to leave, but Dad's next words stopped me cold. You walk out that door and pursue this, you're no longer my daughter. I turned back slowly. You stole from me. You violated my trust. You're the one who destroyed this relationship, not me. As I walked to my car, Linda called after me. You have no proof. It'll be your word against ours. I drove away, tears streaming down my face, feeling like I'd lost my family for the second time. The first was when Mom died. This time, it was by their own choosing. Once safely back in my apartment, I collapsed on the couch, overwhelmed by emotions, betrayal, anger, grief, and a terrible, hollow loss. Through my tears, I called the one person I knew would understand, my best friend Rachel. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said after I explained what happened, her voice filled with protective fury. "Don't do anything until I get there." Rachel arrived with ice cream and a clear head. As we sat in my living room, she listened to the full story without interruption. "You know you have to report this, right?" she said finally. "This isn't a family disagreement. It's theft. It's fraud." "They're my family," I whispered, the words sounding hollow even to me. "No, Ollie. Family doesn't do this to each other." Rachel took my hand. "Your mom would want you to stand up for yourself." That thought, what mom would want, gave me the strength to make the call I'd been dreading. The next morning, I contacted Diana Foster, a lawyer recommended by a colleague. She specialized in financial fraud cases and agreed to see me immediately. Diana's office projected quiet confidence. As I recounted my story, she took detailed notes, her expression giving nothing away until I finished. "Let me be direct, Ms. Matthews," she said, setting down her pen. "You have a strong case for civil recovery. The criminal case will depend on proving who actually initiated the transfers, but the civil case can proceed regardless." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we sue your father and stepmother for the full amount plus damages. The burden of proof is lower in civil court. And if I go this route, there's no turning back with my family?" Diana looked at me with unexpected compassion. "In my experience, when money brings out this level of entitlement and betrayal, there wasn't much real family there to begin with." Those words resonated painfully. I signed the retainer agreement before leaving her office. The bank's fraud investigation moved slowly. They confirmed the transfers were made using my authenticated credentials, making criminal charges complicated. However, the access patterns were suspicious enough to strengthen my civil case. I documented everything, timestamps of when Max had my phone, the subsequent transfers, my confrontation with my father. I even recovered text messages from months earlier where I had explicitly told my father I wouldn't be lending him money for what he called investment opportunities. 3 days after the confrontation, with no money returned and no apology offered, Diana filed the lawsuit against James Matthews and Linda Matthews. The process server delivered the papers to my father at his workplace, a deliberate choice to avoid Linda intercepting them. The family implosion was nuclear. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. Some supported me. "James has always been irresponsible with money," Aunt Patricia texted. "It was only a matter of time before he went too far." Others condemned me. "How could you humiliate your father like this?" wrote my cousin Mark. "Family problems should stay private." The most painful messages came from Tyler and Kaylee. My half-brother's text was brief, "You're dead to us now." Kaylee was more emotional. "I know it was wrong, but did you have to destroy our family? Dad's a mess, and it's your fault." I didn't respond to any of them. Diana had advised maintaining complete silence about the case outside legal channels. My father tried multiple approaches. First came anger, a voicemail filled with recriminations and threats. Then manipulation, a text about how he might lose his job if this became public. Finally, a sad attempt at gaslighting. "Allison, I think you've misunderstood. You offered to help us financially last year. This was just following through on that. Call me so we can clear this up." I had never made such an offer. The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh through my tears. The most unexpected development came a week after filing the lawsuit. I received a call from an unknown number while at work. "Allison? It's Aunt Joanne, your father's sister." I hadn't spoken to Aunt Joanne in years. She lived in Seattle and had distanced herself from the family long before I did. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. "I want you to know I'm on your side. James did something similar to me 10 years ago. I never pursued it legally, and I've regretted it ever since." Her support felt like a lifeline in a sea of chaos. Joanne explained that my father had borrowed nearly $30,000 from her after a tearful story about medical bills, only for her to discover later he'd used it to buy a timeshare in Florida. "I thought I was the only one," she said. "I was too embarrassed to tell anyone." "Did Dad always have these tendencies?" I asked carefully. Joanne sighed. James was always charming and always in trouble. Your mother was his rock. She kept him grounded, responsible. Without her, she trailed off. Linda is the worst possible influence on him. She encourages his worst impulses. As the pretrial process continued, the discovery phase revealed the extent of my father and Linda's financial catastrophe. They had a second mortgage on the house, maxed out credit cards in both their names. Linda's part-time real estate work had generated almost no income in the past year. Most disturbing was the gambling. Bank records showed regular large withdrawals at casinos within driving distance. My father had apparently developed a serious gambling problem after my mother died, something he had hidden from everyone. 2 weeks into the legal process, I was working late when my office phone rang. It was Kaylee, speaking in a hushed voice. "Don't hang up," she pleaded. "I need to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone I called." "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "It was Linda's idea," she blurted out. "The whole thing. Max hacked your phone at the reunion. He does that kind of stuff all the time. Linda told Dad it was the only way to pay off the people he owes money to." "Why are you telling me this now?" There was a pause. "Because they did it to Grandma Wilson too. Dad's mom. Last year. Almost $30,000. And Aunt Patricia. And Uncle Robert. It's like their thing." My blood ran cold. "They've done this before." "Linda has. With her ex-husband before Dad. Max is really good with technology and—" She lowered her voice further. "I'm scared, Allison. The people Dad owes money to came to the house yesterday. They weren't nice." After hanging up, I immediately called Diana and relayed Kaylee's information. She advised contacting a private investigator to look into Linda's background and possibly Max's computer activities. The next day, someone broke into my apartment while I was at work. My laptop was taken, but oddly, more valuable items were left untouched. The police officer who responded suggested it might be related to my case, someone looking for evidence or trying to intimidate me. That night, I received an anonymous call. "Drop the lawsuit if you know what's good for you." Instead of frightening me into submission, these tactics only strengthened my resolve. Diana helped me obtain a restraining order against my father and Linda. I moved temporarily to a secure building with a doorman and upgraded my phone's security. Through all this turmoil, I found unexpected support. Rachel let me crash at her place during the worst of it. Colleagues covered for me when I needed to take calls from my lawyer. I even found a support group for victims of family financial abuse, where stories similar to mine helped me realize I wasn't alone. The private investigator Diana hired uncovered something shocking. Linda wasn't even Linda. Her real name was Amanda Pearson, and she had a record of fraud charges in Nevada dating back 15 years. She had changed her name and moved to Illinois 8 years ago. Her pattern was clear: find vulnerable men, often recent widowers with assets, integrate herself into their lives, and systematically drain them financially. My father wasn't just a perpetrator. He was also a victim. That realization didn't excuse his actions, but helped me understand them. He was a weak man being manipulated by an expert con artist, his grief and poor judgment making him the perfect target. As the court date approached, I felt a strange calm replace my initial rage. This wasn't just about my money anymore. It was about stopping a pattern of abuse that had claimed multiple victims. It was about justice, not just for me, but for my mother's memory and for the father I once knew before Linda entered our lives. 2 days before our scheduled court appearance, my phone rang just after midnight. It was Tyler, his voice tight with panic. "You need to come to the hospital. Dad tried to kill himself." I arrived at Northwestern Memorial Hospital 20 minutes later, my mind racing with contradictory emotions: concern, anger, guilt, suspicion. Was this real or another manipulation tactic? Tyler sat alone in the waiting room, looking years older than his 21 years. "Pills," he said before I could ask. "Linda found him. They pumped his stomach. He's stable." "Where's Linda?" I asked, looking around. "Giving a statement to the police. She's saying it's your fault. That the lawsuit drove him to this." I closed my eyes, absorbing the blow. "And what do you think?" Tyler stared at his hands. "I think it's all fucked up. All of it. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I didn't know about taking your money until after. I swear. Dad told me it was a loan you'd agreed to. A nurse approached before I could respond. Family of James Matthews? We followed her to a private room where my father lay pale against white sheets and 4 in his arm. He seemed smaller somehow. Diminished. His eyes flickered open when we entered, widening when he saw me. Allison, he whispered hoarsely. I'll give you a minute, Tyler said, stepping out. I stood at the foot of the bed, unsure what to say. Part of me wanted to rage at him for this latest manipulation. Another part saw only the broken man who had once carried me on his shoulders at the zoo. Is this another play? Dad? Another way to make me drop the lawsuit? He winced. I deserve that. His voice was barely audible. I've destroyed everything. Your mother would be so ashamed of me. Yes, she would. I agreed, not softening the blow. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. I don't expect you to believe me or forgive me. I just want you to know Linda isn't who she says she is. She's been controlling everything. My accounts, my relationships, my decisions. I know who Linda is, I said quietly. Amanda Pearson from Nevada. The private investigator found her. Dad's eyes widened. You know? I know she's done this before. I know about the gambling debts. I know about Grandma Wilson and Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert. He closed his eyes, more tears escaping. It started small. After your mom died, I was so lost. Linda, Amanda, she made me feel alive again. By the time I realized what was happening, I was in too deep. The gambling, the debts, the lies. It spiraled. That doesn't excuse stealing from your daughter. No, he agreed. Nothing excuses that. I just wanted you to know, it wasn't entirely my idea. But I went along with it. I betrayed you. I betrayed your mother's memory. I stood silently, unwilling to offer absolution, but unable to sustain my anger in the face of his brokenness. The men I owe money to. He continued, his voice strengthening slightly. They're dangerous, Allison. Linda told them about you. About your money. About where you live. A chill ran through me. Is that a threat, Dad? No, he said urgently. A warning. Be careful. Linda is. She's capable of more than you know. Before I could respond, the door opened and Linda herself walked in, flanked by a police officer. Her face was tear-streaked, her posture that of a devoted wife in crisis. When she saw me, her expression flickered briefly with hatred before reassembling into grief. What is she doing here? She demanded. She's the reason James did this. The officer looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, please lower your voice. This is a hospital. I turned to my father. I'll be at the courthouse on Thursday. So will Diana. Think about what kind of man you want to be going forward. As I walked past Linda, she grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. This isn't over. She hissed, quiet enough that only I could hear. I pulled away. You're right about that. The next day brought another unexpected development. Kaylee called again, this time openly. I found something, she said without preamble. On Max's computer. He doesn't know I have it, but it's proof. About how they planned everything. What kind of proof? Screenshots. Records of transfers. Conversations between him and Linda planning how to access your accounts. Even a fake email they created in your name to try to cover their tracks if the bank investigated. My heart raced. Kaylee, this could be crucial evidence. Can you send it to me? Better, she said. I'm bringing Max's external hard drive to the courthouse tomorrow. He keeps backups of everything, he's paranoid like that. There's even more on there. Stuff about other people they've done this to. Aren't you afraid of what Linda might do? There was a pause. Yes, but I'm more afraid of who I'll become if I keep letting this happen. That night, I received another anonymous threatening call. This time, I recorded it. The caller threatened specific violence if I proceeded with the lawsuit. I immediately forwarded the recording to Diana and the police. Diana called back within minutes. This changes things. I'm requesting additional security at the courthouse tomorrow. And Allison? Don't stay at your apartment tonight. I took her advice, spending the night at Rachel's place. Neither of us slept much. Jumping at every sound. The weight of what I was doing, taking on not just my father, but potentially dangerous people he owed money to, settled heavily on my shoulders. Morning brought a text from an unknown number. Check your email. The email contained videos from inside my apartment. Someone had placed hidden cameras. The message was clear. They were watching me, had been watching me. Diana advised against going home. We'll deal with this after court. The police are already investigating. As I prepared to leave for the courthouse, my phone rang. It was Aunt Joanne. I'm flying in, she said without greeting. My plane lands in an hour. I'll be at the courthouse. You shouldn't face this alone. Her support brought the first tears I'd allowed myself in days. Thank you, I whispered. Your mother would be proud of you, she said. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, especially against family. Karen always knew you were the strong one. Hearing my mother's name broke something inside me. I cried openly, grieving not just her loss, but the father I had once loved. The family that had fractured beyond repair. By the time Rachel drove me to the courthouse, I had composed myself. Diana met us at the entrance, along with 2 security officers. Ready? She asked. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. Ready. Little did I know, the true extent of my family's betrayal was about to be exposed, and it was far worse than even I had imagined. The Cook County Courthouse loomed like a fortress of justice, its stone facade impassive to the human dramas unfolding within. I walked up the steps flanked by Diana and Rachel, aware of curious glances from strangers. Financial disputes between family members weren't typically high-profile cases, but something about our determined procession must have telegraphed significance. Inside, the tension was palpable. My father sat with his attorney, a harried-looking man with a worn briefcase. Linda sat beside him, dressed conservatively in a navy suit that screamed respectable wife. The transformation from her usual flashy style was striking and calculated. Tyler and Kaylee sat in the gallery behind them. Tyler looked uncomfortable in a tie that seemed to be choking him. Kaylee met my eyes briefly, then looked away. Clutching her purse tightly, the purse that presumably contained Max's external hard drive. I was surprised to see Max himself slouched in the back row, his expression unreadable behind a fringe of hair. His presence seemed like a miscalculation on Linda's part, bringing the person who had actually hacked my phone into the courtroom. As I took my seat beside Diana, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Aunt Joanne had arrived, slipping into the row behind me. I'm here, she whispered simply. The judge, an older woman with steel gray hair and piercing eyes, called the court to order. The proceedings began with opening statements from both attorneys. Diana was concise and devastating, outlining the theft, the unauthorized access, the pattern of behavior. My father's attorney attempted to paint the situation as a misunderstanding between family members, a verbal agreement gone wrong, an informal loan. The judge's expression remained neutral, but her questions were pointed. The first surprise came when Diana called Kaylee to the stand. My father's head whipped around in shock as his daughter walked forward, avoiding his gaze. Under oath, Kaylee detailed how she had discovered the plan to access my accounts. I overheard Linda and Max talking about it the week before the reunion. Max said he could clone Allison's phone temporarily if he had access to it for a few minutes. And did you warn your sister? Diana asked. Kaylee's eyes filled with tears. No, I was afraid. And Linda had promised to help me with school tuition if I kept quiet. Linda's face darkened with fury. My father looked stunned, as if truly realizing for the first time how his wife had manipulated his entire family. The next witness was Max himself, compelled by subpoena. Initially hostile and monosyllabic, his demeanor changed dramatically when Diana presented evidence from his hard drive, evidence Kaylee had provided. Is this your coding signature, Mr. Pearson? Diana asked, pointing to a screen showing lines of code. Max's eyes widened. He looked at his mother, who subtly shook her head. Mr. Pearson, you are under oath, the judge reminded him. Yes, he finally admitted. That's my work. And this code was designed to do what exactly? He swallowed hard. To access banking credentials from a mobile device. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath as Max, faced with the evidence and the threat of perjury charges, began to unravel the entire scheme. He detailed how he had accessed my phone during the reunion, how Linda had orchestrated the timing of the transfers, how they had done similar things to other family members. Most damning was his admission that this wasn't the first time. Under Diana's skillful questioning, Max revealed that he and Linda had targeted multiple people over the past several years, including Linda's previous husband's family. During a brief recess, I stood in the hallway trying to process what we had learned. The scheme was even more calculated than I had imagined. Linda, Amanda, was the architect, but my father had been a willing participant, using his family connections to identify targets. "Are you holding up okay?" Aunt Joan asked, handing me a cup of water. "I'm just trying to understand how Dad could do this," I said quietly. "James was always susceptible to stronger personalities," she replied. "Your mother kept him on the straight and narrow. Without her." She shook her head sadly. When court resumed, the bombshell testimony came from an unexpected witness, Edward Pearson, Linda's ex-husband. Diana had located him during her investigation, and he had flown in from Nevada to testify. Edward, a dignified man in his 60s, described how Linda had systematically isolated him from his family, encouraged his gambling addiction, and eventually cleaned out not only his accounts, but those of his elderly mother. By the time I realized what was happening, she had disappeared with my son Max, changed their names, moved across the country, he explained. She left me financially and emotionally bankrupt. His testimony visibly affected everyone in the courtroom. Even my father seemed shaken, looking at Linda with new eyes. When it was my father's turn to testify, I steeled myself for more lies, more manipulation. Instead, something unexpected happened. He walked to the stand, shoulders slumped, and, before being sworn in, turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to change my plea," he said quietly. "I'm guilty of everything my daughter has accused me of. I stole from her. I betrayed her trust. I have no excuse." Linda half rose from her seat, her face contorted with rage. "James, what are you doing?" she hissed. The judge silenced her with a look. "Mr. Matthews, you understand the implications of what you're saying?" "I do, Your Honor." He turned to face me directly. "Allison, I can't undo what I've done. But I can stop making it worse. I'm sorry. So deeply sorry." The simple apology, delivered without excuses or qualifications, hit me harder than any of the accusations or evidence. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw my real father again, flawed, weak, but capable of honesty. Linda's carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. She began shouting accusations, claiming my father was mentally unstable, that I had manipulated everyone. The judge ordered her removed from the courtroom. What followed was my father's full confession. He detailed how his gambling addiction had started after Mom died, how Linda had encouraged it while positioning herself as his savior, how she had suggested targeting family members who wouldn't miss the money or owed them anyway, how he had justified it to himself as temporary borrowing, even as the debts mounted and the scheme expanded. "I knew it was wrong," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Every step of the way I knew. But I was weak. I was afraid of losing Linda. Afraid of facing what I'd become without your mother." When Diana asked about his suicide attempt, he looked down. It wasn't a manipulation. I couldn't face what I'd done anymore. Especially to Allison. Karen, her mother, would never forgive me for this. I couldn't forgive myself. By the time testimony concluded, the truth lay exposed in all its ugly complexity. My father and Linda had systematically stolen, not just from me, but from multiple family members. The scheme had been elaborately planned and executed, taking advantage of family trust and connection. The judge's ruling was unequivocal. She ordered full restitution of the stolen funds plus punitive damages. More significantly, she referred the case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution, particularly focusing on Linda and Max for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. "Mr. Matthews." The judge addressed my father directly, While I acknowledge your eventual honesty today, it does not erase your actions. You betrayed your daughter's trust in the most fundamental way. The court orders you to make full financial restitution and recommends you seek treatment for gambling addiction. She turned to me. Ms. Matthews, the court finds in your favor on all counts. While no judgment can restore the family trust that's been broken here, I hope this ruling provides some measure of justice. As the courtroom began to clear, my father was led away by his attorney. He paused as he passed me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, he said quietly. But I'm going to get help. Real help. Not for us. There may not be an us anymore, but because it's what your mother would have wanted. I couldn't speak, could only nod slightly. It wasn't forgiveness. That would take much longer. If it ever came, but it was acknowledgement. Linda was escorted out separately by security officers. As she passed, she leaned toward me. This isn't over, she whispered. But she was wrong. It was over. The truth had finally come to light, and with it, the possibility, however distant, of healing could begin. The days following the court victory passed in a strange limbo. I had won. But it felt hollow. The money would be returned, but the trust was shattered. The legal system had validated my claims, but my family was irrevocably changed. I returned to work, going through the motions while processing everything that had happened. Colleagues were supportive, but couldn't truly understand. How do you explain that your father chose to steal from you? That your family imploded in a courthouse? That justice felt necessary but insufficient? 2 weeks after the ruling, a letter arrived from a rehabilitation facility in Wisconsin. My father's handwriting on the envelope was immediately recognizable, bringing a flood of conflicting emotions. For 3 days, the letter sat unopened on my kitchen counter. Finally, on a rainy Sunday morning, I made a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and broke the seal. Dear Allison, it began. I'm writing this for my 3rd day of treatment. The doctors here say part of recovery is making amends, but I know some damage can't be undone with words alone. The letter continued for 5 pages. No excuses. No requests for forgiveness, just accountability and raw honesty. He detailed how his gambling had started as a way to numb the pain after Mom died. How Linda had encouraged it while positioning herself as his rescuer. How he had rationalized every moral compromise until stealing from his own daughter seemed justifiable. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness, he concluded. I'm writing because you deserve the truth. And because the man your mother loved and the father you once knew would want you to know he's fighting to find his way back to himself. Whether or not you're there to see it. I owe it to Karen's memory and to you to become someone worthy of being called your father again. I cried for the first time since the courthouse, not just for what I had lost, but for what had been taken from all of us. My mother's death had left a void that had been filled with corruption instead of healing. The road forward wasn't clear, but I began taking small steps. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family betrayal trauma. Dr. Levine helped me understand that my feelings, the anger, the grief, the guilt, the confusion, were all normal responses to profound betrayal. Forgiveness isn't an obligation, she told me during one session. It's a personal choice that may or may not be part of your healing journey. And it certainly doesn't mean allowing someone who harmed you back into a position where they can do it again. Those words freed something inside me. I could heal without forcing reconciliation. I could set boundaries without carrying hatred. I could honor the good memories of my father without excusing his actions. Unexpected connections formed in the aftermath. Aunt Joan decided to stay in Chicago for a few months, renting an apartment not far from mine. We discovered a kinship that went beyond family obligation. She had known my mother before she met my father, and her stories filled in pieces of Mom I had never known. Karen was fiercely protective of you, she told me over dinner one night. She wanted you to be independent in a way she never fully managed to be. I think she knew James's weaknesses better than anyone, and she was determined you wouldn't inherit his financial insecurity. Kaylee reached out tentatively a month after the trial. We met at a neutral coffee shop, both nervous and guarded. I should have warned you, she said immediately. I knew something was happening and I didn't say anything. You were manipulated too, I reminded her. We all were. Our relationship began to rebuild slowly. I learned that she had broken ties with Linda completely and was staying with a friend while applying to colleges. Tyler was taking longer to come around, still caught between loyalty to our father and recognition of the wrong that had been done. The legal aftermath continued to unfold. Linda was charged with multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. Max faced lesser charges due to his cooperation. My father, partly protected by his admission and cooperation, received probation and mandatory treatment for gambling addiction. 3 months after the trial, I made a decision that surprised even me. I used part of the settlement money to establish a trust for Tyler and Kaylee's education, money that could only be used for tuition and related expenses, administered by a professional trustee. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that they too were victims of circumstances and poor choices. "Why would you do that after everything?" Rachel asked when I told her. "Because it's what Mom would have done," I replied simply. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean abandoning everyone caught in it. 6 months after the trial, I launched a small side project. Financial literacy workshops specifically designed for families. I partnered with a local community center, sharing basic principles of financial health, but also warning signs of financial exploitation within families. Financial abuse doesn't always look like a stranger hacking your account, I explained to my first group. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you love, someone you trust. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. The workshops became unexpectedly popular, featured in a local newspaper and eventually expanding to multiple locations. Helping others recognize and avoid what had happened to me became part of my own healing. 8 months after the trial, I agreed to meet my father for coffee. He had completed his inpatient treatment and was attending regular Gamblers Anonymous meetings. He looked older but clearer somehow, the haunted expression replaced with something more grounded. "Thank you for coming," he said, making no move to hug me, respecting the boundaries I had established. We talked for an hour about his recovery, about Mom, about the past and the tentative future. Not once did he ask for forgiveness or push for reconciliation. As we prepared to leave, he handed me a small box. "This was your mother's. I found it when cleaning out some old things. I think she would want you to have it." Inside was Mom's nurse's watch, the one she had worn throughout my childhood. Simple, practical, reliable, like her. "She was so proud of you," he said quietly. "She knew you would be okay, no matter what. Stronger than both of us." I closed my hand around the watch. "I'm still figuring out what forgiveness looks like, Dad. I'm not there yet." "I know," he nodded. "I'm not asking for it. Just for the chance to show you who I'm trying to become." That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, my mother's watch in my palm. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more complex, a hard-won wisdom about family, boundaries, and self-worth. The lesson hadn't come easily. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no. Sometimes standing firm is more compassionate than giving in. Sometimes justice must precede healing. I had lost the family I thought I had, but in its place was beginning to build something more authentic, relationships based on honesty and respect rather than obligation and manipulation. My phone chimed with a text from Kaylee. "Dinner next week? Tyler might come too." I smiled slightly and typed back, "I'd like that." The road ahead would be neither straight nor easy, but for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt ready to walk it. Not as a victim, but as a woman who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. Not defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had reclaimed. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to set boundaries with family? Do you think justice and forgiveness can coexist, or must one come before the other? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about navigating complex family dynamics and building financial independence. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, protecting your well-being is never selfish. It's the foundation everything else is built upon.